Improve your English through stories. In this video, you will listen to an interesting English story that will help you improve your listening, understanding, vocabulary, and speaking skills. Listen, understand, learn, speak. Welcome to English with Nikhil. Learn English through interesting stories and real-life conversations. Listen carefully. Understand naturally. Speak English with confidence. We returned to the park and sat on another bench. I was thinking about everything that had happened that morning. Arjun asked, "Do you feel closer to answering your question now?" I replied, "Yes, but I still feel that there is more to understand." He nodded and said, "That is completely normal." Then he asked me about the mistakes I had made in the past. I remembered several moments when I had made poor decisions. Some mistakes had made me feel disappointed in myself. I said, "Sometimes I wish I could change my past." Arjun looked at me and replied, "You cannot change the past, but you can learn from it." His words made me feel hopeful. I told him that I had sometimes been afraid of failing. Because of that fear, I had avoided trying new things. Arjun said, "Fear can teach you to be careful, but it should not stop you from growing." I asked, "How can I become less afraid?" He replied, "Take small steps and learn from every experience." He explained that confidence grew through action. I understood that waiting for perfect confidence was not useful. I had to begin even when I felt uncertain. Arjun said, "Your future is not decided by one mistake." He added, "Your next choice is always important." I looked at the path in front of us. It reminded me that life was also a long journey. Every decision could take me in a new direction. I said, "Maybe I am not only the person I was yesterday." Arjun smiled and replied, "You are also the person you are choosing to become." That sentence stayed in my mind for a long time. I felt that I was finally beginning to understand the meaning of personal growth. The sun was now high in the sky, and the park was becoming busier. People were walking, talking, and enjoying the morning. Arjun checked the time on his phone. He said we should go home soon. Before leaving, I wanted to ask him one final question. I looked at him and said, "If you had to describe me, what would you say?" Arjun smiled and thought carefully. Then he said, "I would say that you are curious, thoughtful, and willing to learn." I listened quietly as he continued. He said, "You care about your future and try to improve yourself." He also said, "Sometimes you doubt yourself, but you do not stop asking questions." His answer made me smile. I asked, "Do you think I am a good person?" Arjun replied, "Being a good person is not about being perfect." He said, "It is about trying to make good choices and learning when you make mistakes." I thought about the old man we had helped earlier. I also remembered our conversation about dreams and values. Slowly, the answer to my question became clearer. I said, "Maybe I am a person who is still learning and growing." Arjun smiled and replied, "That is a very good beginning." I continued, "I am shaped by my thoughts, values, choices, and actions." Arjun nodded and said, "And you will continue changing as you learn new things." I understood that identity was not one fixed answer. It was a journey that continued throughout life. I did not have to know everything about myself immediately. I only had to keep learning and making better choices. We stood up and started walking towards our homes. As I walked beside Arjun, I felt proud of the person I was becoming. I wanted to practice them in real life. Arjun said that is how values become part of your character. We walked slowly along the quiet road. I noticed a small piece of paper lying near the footpath. I picked it up and looked for a nearby dustbin. Arjun laughed and said, "You are already following your values." I smiled and threw the paper into the dustbin. It was only a small action, but it made me feel responsible. I understood that good character was built through small habits. I did not have to do something extraordinary every day. I only had to make better choices whenever I could. That idea made personal growth feel simple and possible. I continued walking with a clearer understanding of myself. When we reached the corner near our homes, Arjun stopped walking. He pointed towards a small tea shop across the road. He said, "Would you like to have some tea before going home?" I smiled and replied, "That sounds like a good idea." We crossed the road carefully and entered the small shop. The shop was quiet because it was still early in the morning. We sat near the window and ordered 2 cups of tea. While we waited, Arjun asked, "What will you do after going home?" I replied, "I want to write down what I learned today." Arjun looked interested and asked, "Why do you want to write it down?" I said, "Writing may help me understand my thoughts better." He nodded and said, "That is a good habit." A few minutes later, the shopkeeper brought our tea. I picked up my cup and looked outside the window. People were moving quickly along the road. Everyone seemed busy with their own work and responsibilities. I wondered if they also thought about who they were. Arjun said, "Many people ask themselves that question at different times." I replied, "Maybe everyone is trying to understand themselves." He smiled and said, "And everyone finds the answer in a different way." I took a small sip of tea and thought about his words. Then I said, "My answer may also change as I grow." Arjun replied, "That does not make your answer wrong." He explained that people learned new things through new experiences. Their goals, ideas, and understanding could change over time. I felt comfortable knowing that I did not need a final answer today. I only needed to remain honest with myself and continue learning. The warm tea made our thoughtful conversation feel peaceful. After finishing our tea, we left the shop and continued walking. The streets were becoming more crowded as the morning passed. Arjun looked at me and asked, "What is one thing you want to improve?" I thought carefully before answering his question. Then I said, "I want to become more confident." Sometimes I knew the answer, but I was afraid to speak. I worried that other people might judge me. Arjun listened carefully and did not interrupt. He said, "Confidence does not mean that you never feel nervous." I asked, "Then what does confidence mean?" He replied, "It means trusting yourself enough to take action." His answer made me think about my fear in a different way. I said, "Maybe I should speak even when I feel nervous." Arjun nodded and replied, "You can begin with small situations." He suggested that I practice speaking with people I trusted. I liked his suggestion because it felt simple and practical. Then I told him that I also wanted to become more disciplined. Sometimes I made good plans but did not follow them properly. Arjun smiled and said, "Discipline grows through regular practice." He explained that small daily efforts could create big changes. I understood that improvement did not happen in one day. It required patience, effort, and consistency. I said I will start by following one small routine every day. Arjun replied, "That is a good way to begin." I felt motivated because my goals no longer seemed too difficult. I knew that I could improve step by step. My weaknesses were not permanent limits. They were simply areas where I could learn and grow. At last we reached the place where our roads separated. Arjun's house was on one side and my house was on the other. We stopped and looked at each other for a moment. I said, "Thank you for listening to all my questions." Arjun smiled and replied, "I enjoyed our conversation too." I told him that his answers had helped me understand myself better. He said, "You found many of the answers by thinking honestly." I smiled because I knew that he was right. Our conversation had helped me look at my life in a new way. I no longer believed that identity was only a name or an appearance. I understood that my identity included my thoughts and values. It also included my dreams, choices, actions, and experiences. I knew that my mistakes were part of my journey. However, they did not have to decide my future. I could learn from them and make better choices. I also understood that personal growth never truly ended. Every new experience could teach me something important. Every challenge could help me become stronger and wiser. I looked at Arjun and said, "Maybe the answer to who am I will continue changing." He nodded and replied, "And that is what makes life interesting." We laughed and said goodbye to each other. Arjun started walking towards his house. I turned and began walking towards mine. On the way home, I felt peaceful and hopeful. I was still learning about myself, but I was no longer confused. I knew that I was a person who wanted to learn, grow, and improve. I smiled because I had discovered an important part of my identity. I was not only asking who I was also choosing who I wanted to become.